You are worth $11 million, and your neighbors think you're behind on your mortgage. That's not an accident. That's the architecture. The truck is a 2009 Tacoma with a cracked taillight you've been meaning to fix for 4 years. The taillight isn't broken because you can't afford a new one. It's broken because fixing it has never once made the list of things that matter. You are 39. You live in a 3-bedroom ranch outside Muncie, Indiana, the kind with a chain-link fence and a basketball hoop with no net. Your name is Dale Pruitt, though most people at the hardware store just call you the guy with the trailer. You buy your jeans at the same place you bought them in college. Not out of some performance of humility, nobody's watching closely enough for it to be a performance. You just never got around to needing better jeans. Here is the thesis, and it will hold true whether you're worth $11,000 or $11 million. The way a life looks and the way a balance sheet reads are almost never the same document. Most people spend their whole lives trying to make those two things match. You stopped trying somewhere around year 6. It started with a laundromat. Not a metaphor, an actual laundromat, 4 miles from where you grew up, with a hand-painted sign that had been fading since before you were born. You drove past it for 11 years on your way to a job installing HVAC systems. One Tuesday in March, there was a "Closing, Everything Must Go" sign taped to the glass, handwritten, already peeling at one corner. You pulled over, not because you saw an empire, because you were curious how much a dead laundromat costs. The answer was $34,000. And the machines still worked. The owner was a woman named Carol Ann Dietz, 71 years old, who'd run the place since her husband died in 1994. She wasn't selling because business was bad. She was selling because her knees were bad, and because nobody in her family wanted to learn how a coin drop mechanism works. She walked you through the place like she was showing you a photo album. This dryer sticks, that one runs hot. The third row is where the regulars sit and gossip on Sunday afternoons. You had $41,000 in savings, 8 years of HVAC work, no car payment, no debt. You paid Carol Ann $34,000 cash, and she cried a little, not because of the money, but because someone was going to keep the lights on. Here's the math, and it's not glamorous math. The laundromat grossed $2,900 a month. After utilities, a part-time attendant for 6 hours a week, and maintenance, it cleared $1,650 a month. That's $19,800 a year on a $34,000 purchase. Not a fortune, a little more than a decent used car, generated every single year, forever, as long as the machines kept spinning. You didn't quit your HVAC job. You didn't tell anyone at work. You just kept driving the Tacoma, kept wearing the same Carhartt jacket, and started reading everything you could find about coin-op laundry, vending routes, and what people in your world called boring money. 18 months later, a guy named Ferris Talbot, who ran 3 vending machines out of the back of his pickup and was retiring to Florida, offered you his route for $9,000. 12 machines total, scattered across 2 tire shops, a machine shop, and a Baptist church fellowship hall that oddly sold more Snicker bars than anywhere else on the route. The machines cleared $780 a month combined on a $9,000 purchase. You bought it in a parking lot, paid in an envelope, and Ferris gave you an Igloo cooler as a bonus, like it was part of the deal. 2 years after that, you noticed something about the empty lot behind the old feed store downtown. Gravel, unused, 6 blocks from the county courthouse. You found the owner, a retired judge named Wilmer Coates, who'd forgotten he even still owned it and leased it from him for $400 a month. You put up a chain, a hand-painted sign, and charged $5 a day for parking during the farmers market and the 2 weekends a year the county fair set up nearby. First year, it cleared $6,200 above the lease, not because it was clever, because nobody else had bothered to ask a forgetful judge about a gravel lot. By year 5, you'd added a storage unit facility, 18 units, converted from an old chicken processing building 40 minutes outside town, purchased for $61,000 from a widow named Reba Sutter, who just wanted it gone off her plate before tax season. You didn't renovate it, you didn't paint it, you fixed the locks, mowed twice a month, and it filled up within 4 months because storage in that county was scarce and nobody minded that the building used to smell faintly of feathers. Each of these had the same shape, a tired asset nobody wanted, a tired owner who wanted out more than they wanted top dollar, a number small enough that an HVAC tech with a savings account could write a check without flinching, and a return that, stacked next to the last one, started to compound into something that no longer fit in your head as side income. By year 7, between the laundromat, the vending route, the parking lot, and the storage units, you were clearing just under $9,000 a month. You still drove the Tacoma. The taillight cracked that spring, hitting a curb in the storage lot, and you never got around to fixing it. Year 8 is when you met Brent Kowalczyk. Brent showed up at a regional trade mixer for property owners, the kind of event held in a Marriott conference room with a sad tray of cheese cubes. Brent drove a white Escalade with chrome rims that didn't match anything about the gravel roads most of the attendees actually lived on. He wore a Rolex Submariner he mentioned within the first 4 minutes of conversation, unprompted, the way some men mention their kids. He talked about scaling verticals and building a personal brand in the real estate space, while handing out cards printed on stock heavy enough to double as a coaster. Brent had, by his own account, $2 million in real estate under management. What he had, in fact, was 4 duplexes leveraged at 90%, a car payment larger than your old HVAC salary, and a habit of ordering the most expensive bottle on a menu to make a point to whoever was watching. He looked at your Tacoma in the parking lot and asked, not unkindly, if you needed a ride to your car afterward. He assumed the truck belonged to catering. You said no thanks. You let him assume it. Being underestimated by a man like Brent wasn't an insult, it was cover. Nobody pitches a timeshare to the guy they think is broke. Nobody asks the guy in the Carhartt jacket to co-sign a bad idea. You spent that whole mixer being invisible in the most useful way a person can be invisible, and you left with 2 phone numbers of tired owners looking to sell, and Brent left with a bar tab he'd put on a card that was, you'd learn later, already maxed out twice that year. That same year, your cousin Randy called. Randy was 36. Working 2 jobs, and his daughter needed a procedure their insurance wouldn't fully cover, somewhere in the neighborhood of $14,000 out of pocket. Randy didn't call to ask for money. Randy called because he was scared, and you were the only person in the family who ever seemed to have his act together, even if nobody quite knew why. You could have written the check that night. You had it. It would not have moved a single decimal point in your life. You didn't. Instead, you drove out to Randy's place on a Saturday with a legal pad, and you sat at his kitchen table and you went through his numbers with him for 3 hours. What he owed, what he could refinance, what a payment plan with the hospital's billing office would actually look like if he asked the right way instead of the scared way. You co-signed a small personal loan with him at a real bank with real terms, so it would show up on his credit and mean something. You told him about the parking lot behind the feed store not as a boast, but because you thought he could run something like that on the side, on weekends, with his truck and a folding table. It would have been easier to hand him $14,000 and feel like a good man for an afternoon, but you'd seen what happened to a distant uncle who got a windfall like that once, no structure attached to it, gone in under a year, and worse off for having tasted it. Money without a frame around it doesn't rescue people. It just delays the reckoning and adds a little shame on top. What Randy needed wasn't your money. He needed to believe he could build something himself, the way you had, out of a fixed sum and a Saturday and somebody willing to sit at the table with him. Randy's daughter got her procedure. Randy paid off the loan in 14 months ahead of schedule and started buying vending machines of his own that spring, 3 of them, off a Facebook Marketplace listing for $600 total. You didn't ask if he was proud of himself. You could just tell. The number came the way most true numbers do, quietly, in a spreadsheet, on a Tuesday. Your accountant, a soft-spoken woman named Priscilla Ames, who'd done your taxes since the laundromat was your only asset, emailed you a year-end summary at 6:40 in the morning. You read it standing at the kitchen counter in the same Carhartt jacket, coffee going cold beside the laptop, the dog scratching at the back door to be let out. Net worth, across the laundromat, the vending routes, now 4 of them after you bought out 2 smaller operators, the parking lot, the storage facility, and a 5th property you'd picked up almost as an afterthought, $11,140,000. You let the dog out. You read the number twice. You did not pour a different coffee, or call anyone, or stand differently than you had 30 seconds before. You drove the Tacoma to the hardware store that morning, same as any Tuesday, to pick up a part for the dryer that had started running hot again at the laundromat. The taillight was still cracked. You still hadn't gotten around to it. The kid at the counter didn't recognize your name, and you didn't offer it. Somewhere, Brent Kowalczyk was probably telling someone at a different mixer about a deal that hadn't closed yet, in an Escalade that would be repossessed within 2 years. Somewhere, Randy was checking on his own 3 vending machines, proud of a number so much smaller than yours it wasn't worth comparing, and prouder of it than you'd been of any of yours. $11 million, and a taillight that still needed fixing. Maybe that's the only real test there is, not what a person owns, but what they never bothered to fix, because fixing it was never the point.